Thursday, September 24th started out like any other football game day, or so they tell me. I can't remember that day or many of the others to follow. I do have small blips in memories, such as my teammates helping me up after repeated hits, limping from the bus to my parents' car after the game, and glimpses of the defender that tackled me multiple times during the game. I also remember the next day not being able to remember where my first period class met, but just brushing it off as just stress because of my sprained ankle. Around fourth period, stumbling and vomiting, but my teacher recognizing it due to required trainings and emailing my parents. The average adult brain is about 3 pounds and basically floats around in cerebral fluid around the skull. Whenever the skull is caused to stop suddenly, a concussion or traumatic brain injury may occur. Now, the CDC estimates that about 4 million concussions occur each year. Football is the most common leading risk for males, with soccer is the most common leading risk for females. Now, 78% of these occur during games, not practices. Headaches and dizziness, both about 80% of the time, are the most commonly reported symptoms of a concussion. But it is very important to remember in our talk tonight that no concussions are exactly the same. 47% say that their symptoms did not develop until the next day or in a couple of hours. As Regan stated, his didn't develop until the next day. Well, that weekend I laid low. Gave my parents my phone just in case, and I chilled out. After that weekend, I wasn't feeling any better, so they took me to the doctor. Within minutes, I was diagnosed with multiple concussions in one event, a traumatic brain injury. Now, the doctor said that I wasn't allowed to do any schoolwork. I was supposed to just lay at home, play with Play-Doh and my pet dogs. Now, that's a lot of schoolwork, especially with pre-AP classes. What was I going to do about it? But I had to return home to horrible nausea and terrible headaches. One of the most important treatments for concussions is rest, rest, and more rest. The Journal on Pediatrics shows that students who did not remain in cognitive rest during recovering from a concussion took an average of 2 times as long to heal. Now, Cook's Children's Hospital at Philadelphia notes that the metabolic demand for the brain to heal in the first week is increased significantly. After that week, I returned to the doctor's office, and I had to do this thing called C3 logics testing. Basically, what they would do is measure my memory, my cognitive speed, and my balance through a series of video-like games. My dad had to take off work each time, and as a former college football player himself, who suffered many concussions himself back in the day, he wondered why this wasn't a get-back-in-the-field situation. Well, not only did these video games make my head want to explode, but they made me feel like a complete loser every time I left. I knew I wasn't answering the questions correctly. I mean, who can name the months backwards without getting a headache or a fuzzy brain? C3 logics testing is the most recommended form of concussion analysis that we have today. It takes into accommodation all the recommendations from the 2012 International Conference of Concussions in Sports. It was developed by Cleveland Clinic. Now, the reason that Regan probably felt like a complete loser is because he probably felt like he wasn't making any progress. Now here is a look at Regan's actual results. See, he probably felt like it was just slow, but as you can see, each week, little by little, he was making some improvements. Now, let's go back and talk about Regan's father's generation of getting back into the game quickly. About 78% of pro football players who returned the same day that they sustained a concussion returned back. Now, if you have 1 concussion, you are 2 times as likely to receive another. If you have 2, you are 2 to 4 times as likely to receive another. If you have had 3, you are 3 to 9 times as likely to receive another. Now, getting hit with a concussion and already having one is known as second impact syndrome, which can be fatal. Man, the doctors and my parents were always very considerate with my desires to get back into school. So the doctor allowed me to go back to school, but not allowed to do any work for 3 weeks. Nothing. The fluorescent lights in the school made me want to literally claw my eyes out with pain. And don't even get me started on the noise level in the cafeteria. Now, other people who had been injured that same game were out playing football again. Why was I still out? I was prescribed steroids to help reduce the swelling in my brain, which was basically just one big bruise. And at one point, I had to get a neck x-ray to survey my neck pain, which saw something weird on the x-ray, so I had to get an MRI. It ruled out the neck break, thank goodness, but it still meant more testing, more doctors, more missed schoolwork, and ultimately more stress, which seemed to be hindering my healing. So, feeling the pressure, not from my teachers, but as my own expectations of myself, I began to make up the schoolwork. I struggled to be able to read, and I couldn't recall basic vocabulary that I'd used my entire life. My reaction time and cognitive speed had greatly diminished to the point where one doctor wanted to do cognitive IQ testing, which they do for special education. This concussion had become a temporary type of learning disability, and schoolwork became frustrating, annoying, and quite frankly painful, and I felt my self-esteem drifting more and more as I withdrew. All of Regan's symptoms are documented symptoms of concussions. See, the stress and anxiety that students feel while having a concussion can actually hinder their healing. Long-term effects of not healing correctly from a concussion include attention problems and concentration problems, and many, many more. So, back to the game. Regan was a stationary player getting hit by a moving player at approximately 25 miles per hour. Now, this happened to Regan multiple times during the game, causing a severe concussion. Now, Regan was trying to attempt to work, but he was doing more than what was physically possible at that point. Now, my friends, they didn't know what to say to me, and I to them. I started drifting, and that's whenever the depression really set heavy on my heart. I felt like I was just living in a bad dream. I used to have it all in September. Now, my mom would have to ask me, "How are we doing today, buddy? Are you feeling like you want to hurt yourself?" I told her that I'd been suicidal and that I was thinking of killing myself. She knew that I was working with the small group leaders and the church leaders to get through this. I would always reply, "No, Mom, I know this is temporary, whether I believed it or not." Now, my friends still wouldn't say a word to me. If it had been a scar or needed a cast, would they have understood more? Regan makes a valid point. About 50% of all brain-injured people experience depression at least 1 year after the injury. For a much smaller ratio, in the general public, about 1 in 10 people experience depression. Now, depression cannot be ignored or wished away. You must seek help, even if that's with prescription drugs. Now, a study was done on pro football players. 87% said that they had experienced depression after quitting football, with 64% saying that it limited their daily life. Now, the age group at the biggest risk of this is under the age of 25 because the brain is not yet developed. Man, I had to make it out of this. I had to find something in this life that I loved and a hobby that I loved. I had to dig deep into my faith, and I had to be humble with my teachers, asking for help, and my parents. So, I auditioned for the school play, and I made it. Then came time to audition for Varsity Theatre. I made it. One-act play season came along, and I auditioned for that, got a major role, and even earned a medal at competition. And life began to look up. So, here I am, 8 months later. I feel more and more myself each day, but I still struggle to be that spontaneous, adventurous kid that I was before. I still have memory issues. Can you imagine how long it took me to memorize a speech? But this injury has given me a brand new perspective on life. Now I believe that anything that we go through in life is to help others somewhere along the road. And we hear so much about concussions nowadays that we probably know at least one person with it. Have you ever thought about how much just talking to them might help? That means talking openly about depression and suicide. I don't know about you, but whenever I hear about a concussion patient nowadays, I seek them out and I let them know that I've gone through it and that they can get through it too. Thank you.